Hello everyone and welcome to Create Connect webinar for the Arts and Cultural Funding Program, or the ACFP. My name is Peter Wood and I'm the Regional Arts and Partnership Manager with the Arts Funding and Development team here at Create New South Wales. This webinar will be providing an overview of the ACFP with a particular focus on projects with a regional focus. And joining us for this webinar are two successful regional applicants from the previous funding round, and I'll be introducing you to them shortly. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging elders as well. So today's webinar, we're going to be looking at an overview of the Create New South Wales funding opportunities, as well as the guidelines attached to those funding programs. We'll be providing some hints on how to write a strong application with a focus on the selection criteria. And we're also, as I mentioned, going to hear from two successful applicants with a focus on the strategic priority area of people living and working in regional New South Wales. So for this webinar, we're joined by Amanda and Kristy. So Amanda Dumesny is the director of the Big Scrub Orchestra, a non-profit that provides music, learning, performing and recording opportunities to young people in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. And Amanda was recently awarded the 2019 Northern Rivers Community Foundation Chairperson's Grant to attend Little Kids Rock in the USA to study their transformative modern band programs for young people, and was also the recipient of the 2018 Ian Potter Cultural Trust to attend the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. She went there to study their groundbreaking arts program for students in low socioeconomic schools. Amanda was successful with her contemporary music application to the individual and group category and received $16,000 for her project that focused on transforming lives with contemporary music in regional and remote New South Wales. And I'll ask Mandy to describe her project in a little more detail in just a moment. Our other guest for the webinar is Kristy Jones. Kristy is the Business Development Manager for NORPA, the Northern Rivers Performing Arts, based in Lismore, and also comes from the Northern Rivers region in New South Wales. Kristy's worked in senior roles in communications, marketing and business development across the arts, finance, education and travel industries. And NORPA was successful with their theatre project application, Love for One Night, which will be a new work, and I'm going to ask Kristy to describe the project just in a little bit more detail for us now. Thanks, Kristy.
Thanks, Peter. So our project Love for One Night, excitingly, just began rehearsals today. So I was just in the room earlier this morning for the meet and greet and script read, which was very fun. So Love for One Night is a large site-specific work. As Peter said, it's new. It's an original devised piece of theatre. Told in NORPA's signature style, playful, theatrical, and based on stories that have been gathered from around the region. So the concept for the show was inspired by one of our fabulous local country pubs, the Eltham Hotel, which is situated in a very small village just outside of Lismore. I think the locals like to say the middle of nowhere, the center of everything. So yeah, we'll be setting up there for a 3 to 4 week season in September, kind of a takeover of the pub, set up a seating bank outside, and the pub will be the backdrop for the performance. So yeah, it's an exciting collaboration between a theatre company and a country pub, probably a bit unique, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and the company is renowned for its site-specific work with some amazing projects that have taken place in the region over the last few years. I might now throw to you, Amanda, and ask you to give us a bit of an overview of the project that you were funded for.
Thanks, Peter. The project that I've been working on is a modern band program. So we provide keyboard, guitar, bass and drums, and we do it in genres that young people are comfortable and are happy with, which are things like rock, pop, hip hop, and electronic music. So the young people get opportunities to compose songs, record and perform in their local communities. And the areas I'm working with are rural and remote areas, and a lot of them at the moment have been affected by both the black summer bushfires and the recent flooding. So it's a great opportunity for the young people to express emotion and through the arts, and also it brings a lot of excitement to those small villages that are rebuilding. And we've also connected up with the Ewingar Rising Festival, which was designed originally to help people with the bushfires, and now with the unfortunate flooding we've had recently, they're spreading it out through the little, again, the little rural halls in our area, with a larger festival happening in March next year. And we also have what I like to call a citizen artist, a term I picked up at the Kennedy Centre. And our citizen artist or mentor is Ash Grunwald, who's a local, pretty well-known blues musician in Australia. And he'll be joining us to inspire the students and provide a bit of mentoring as well. So lots of fun and excitement for these small rural villages that don't get a lot of arts opportunities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. And the reason why we've asked both Amanda and Kristy to talk about their projects and to join us today is I think that gives you two examples of two different types of projects, regionally based, one obviously from an organisation and one coming from an individual as well. Just picking up a little bit, I guess, on what you were talking about, the floods and the impacts, and obviously, you know, the other crises that the regions have been dealing with in terms of fire. I mean, often these do impact on projects once they're up and running, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but there's always the opportunity to vary your project, because we do understand that obviously sometimes delivery of projects can be affected by some of these big, huge events that are taking place across the world. Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick overview of what is actually open at the moment in terms of funding and the funding programs that Create New South Wales offers. There are three key areas: creative Koori funding, individual project funding, and organisation funding. So with our Koori project funding, Creative Koori funding, this aims to build support for a strong and resilient and exciting Aboriginal arts and cultural sector in New South Wales. So funding is available for up to $60,000 and above, which supports arts and cultural activity in New South Wales Aboriginal organisations. Individual project funding is the program that Amanda had applied for, and this supports innovative vibrancy and creativity within the New South Wales arts and cultural sector. Funding is available up to $60,000 towards a range of arts and cultural activities, and this could include things like project development, could include presentation, partnership building, community and audience engagement. So a very broad area of support there. Organisation funding is the program that Kristy and NORPA came through, and these are for organisations who can apply for project funding for one-off projects, but also for annual funding, and that's provided on an annual basis to support arts and cultural organisations to deliver multiple arts and cultural activities to diverse audiences throughout a single calendar year or a financial year. So the two differences there, obviously one focused very much on individual project development and the other one on organisations. I would also mention that we do have another quick response funding program called Small Project Grants, and these are grants which support the creation, development and presentation of new work and professional development opportunities as well. So these grants are available throughout the year, and you can apply for grants from between $500 up to $5,000, and full details on that program, as well as the three that I've just mentioned, are all available on the Create New South Wales website. A quick overview of what has been funded in the last round, just to give you an indication of the successful applications. We received a total number of 300 applications in the last round, and the total that were funded from those was 122 at $4.9 million. And This included 70 organisations that were funded through that round, as well as 52 individuals and group projects that were funded through that round. Following the announcement of successful recipients, all those details are available on the Create New South Wales website for you to review. So just having a look at some things that you might want to start thinking about before starting an application. And one of the key recommendations here is obviously to read the guidelines. So guidelines for all of those programs are available on the Create New South Wales website, and it's really important that you take some time to read through those guidelines because that'll offer you a lot of information about the nature of the program that you're applying to. Importantly, it will talk about eligibility, and it's really important that you make sure that you're applying to the right round, to the right funding category, and that you're actually eligible to apply. So eligibility for these funding programs are all outlined in the guidelines. Reviewing and looking at resources and fact sheets that are available on the Create New South Wales website is also really important. We have a number of resources available on the website. Webinars such as this, which cover a lot of topic areas, are available on the website, but also some Q&A sheets and fact sheets associated with the Arts and Cultural Funding Program are also available on the website as well. And the other thing that we always recommend, and I'm sure our guest speakers will talk to this as well, is the allocation of time to complete your application. There are a lot of steps involved in the process, and it's really important that you give yourself enough time to be able to get your application together, and can include things like letters of support and other material that you might need, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. But I might take this opportunity to ask Kristy and Mandy if there's anything in particular about what you should think about in terms of before starting an application. I might start with you, Amanda.
Thanks, Peter. Well, what I was thinking of is if you're doing a lot of partnerships and collaborations, make sure you get onto those people and groups really early, because in my case, it's our point of delivery is schools, and we're dealing with festivals and public events and different artists. Often the artists will be touring, and schools are busy places. Festivals, people are always really busy. So the earlier you can get onto all your collaborators, the better, and make sure that's all worked out. And you might find your project shapes itself and revises itself during that process of contacting people. And of course, getting all your letters of support in really early as well, because sometimes that takes a bit of chasing up with people and getting quotes for budgets, all those sort of things. Yeah, start as early as you can.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. Kristy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would completely back up what Amanda just said, to leave yourself plenty of time to, collect your support letters and engage with the other organisations and colleagues that you're calling in support from. I would also say to have support materials front of mind as well. Just documenting what you're doing, if the project has started in any form, or even as was our case when we applied for Love for One Night, we've had one creative development of it. So we had some shots from the rehearsal room, but we also submitted mood boards and, kind of what was inspiring us as well, so that the assessment panel can, I guess, visually also see what your project's about.
Yeah, fantastic. Really great advice. And something that Amanda mentioned, which is really interesting, is that sometimes your project can change a bit from when you're thinking about putting an application into when you actually hit that submit button. So allowing yourself enough time for those changes to occur. There may be additions to the program, or some element may drop out, but yeah, allowing yourself enough time to accommodate those sort of changes as you're working your way through that application process. Great, thank you both for that. So when you're putting an application in, there are three key areas that you will need to address and to talk about your application through these assessment criteria. And it's these assessment criteria that are used by the assessment panel or board to score your application. So they're in the area of merit, impact, and viability. So just briefly talking through those. With merit, this is about the actual vision and the objective of your project. So that will include things like key personnel, key activities associated with the project. So really it is very much about the vision, the why that you're doing it. In terms of impact, this is around what the overall impact and outcomes of the proposed activity will be. And you can select one of three areas of impact for this. It could be audience impact, it could be art form or impact, or it could be operational impact. So those are the three key areas that you need to address the impact that your project will have. For example, with audience, it may be developing a larger audience or a new audience for your project or program. And viability. This is primarily about the financial considerations of the project, and importantly, making sure that you have a realistic and achievable budget that's put together. And that's one particular area that we have a lot of inquiries about in terms of looking for assistance and advice on putting budgets together. So again, I think listening to what Amanda and Kristy were talking about in terms of preparing for an application, allowing yourself enough time to put that material together, particularly budgets. So when addressing those the assessment criteria areas, it's really important that you start thinking about how you're going to respond to them, and really important that you actually tell the story of your application or your project. Some of the key tips that we've pulled out here are things like using plain English, elaborating on why you want the grant, looking at the purpose of your project, providing strong support material that we've mentioned. And also a really important point, I think, is not assuming that the assessors are familiar with your work. So not assuming knowledge for your project. So really important to use that clear language to step out what your project is about. And of course, that area of making sure that you've got a very clear and balanced budget attached to the application. The assessment process also considers the below priority areas at the final stages of assessment. So these priority areas, there are 5 of those, and they are New South Wales Aboriginal people, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, people with disability or who are deaf, young people, people living and or working in regional New South Wales, and people living and or working in Western Sydney. So if you're going to select as criteria one of these, strategic priority areas, it's really important that you talk meaningfully about the priority area that your project is addressing. Obviously today we're talking with 2 people who have submitted project applications and program applications that have a regional focus. So they address the people living and or working in regional New South Wales as far as their priorities went. There could be others that more within your application. You might have 2 or 3 of these priority areas. But if you are going to indicate a priority area that your project engages with, it's really important that you talk very meaningfully about that and show evidence of you engaging with that priority area. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. I should also point out that you don't have to have a priority area within your project. It's not a mandatory thing as part of the application. So I might throw to Kristy now, and when we were talking about the merit of a project, and I was just wondering if you could provide us with any hints on how you might best describe your project, how to put your project in the best light as far as addressing that area of merit.
So I guess, yeah, Love for One Night for us because, yeah, it was in its sort of, I guess, initial stages when we applied. So, but we do and do have a strong vision for the project. So some things that we really focused on around Merit was talking about the project in detail and our partnerships and collaborations with so the Love for One Night is supported by obviously the Eltham Hotel being the venue, but we've also partnered with Performing Lines to investigate potential of touring opportunities for the show, as well as the local artists that we're working with as well, because it crosses form and discipline a little bit. So we're working with some people who don't usually work in the theatre space. So a video designer, camera operators, these kind of people. So we focused on that as well. And also, knowing who we wanted to work with and being able to list all the participants. I mean, one of the great things about Love for One Night is that it's quite a large cast and creative team. So there'll be around 50 people who will touch this or work on this show in a paid capacity across the creative developments and into the season. So that's pretty exciting after the past couple of years that the industry's had, particularly up here, and also post flood as well. So I think having clear reasoning as well. So one of the big reasons for us doing Love for One Night, as Peter said earlier, NORPA is a company that's very renowned for doing large scale site specific work. So we've got a track record in performing shows in non-traditional theatre spaces like Railway Wonderland, which was done on a disused railway station in Lismore, and then Dreamland, which has been performed in 2 small halls around the region. So we have really strong documentation for both of those projects, so we can speak to those, but also our reasoning. I guess post-COVID as well, we wanted to focus on a project that, even though it's risky being outdoors, it almost felt somewhat more secure. But it is kind of in a response to COVID, and now it's actually become, we didn't know it at the time, but it's actually been a great response to the flood as well. So we lost our venue, our home. So while it wasn't a project that was developed in response to the flood, it's been sort of like our lifeline and a really great focus for the company amid the crisis and flood response of the past few months. So
yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Kristy. And I think all those elements go towards the question of merit, and it's very multi-layered in terms of all the different aspects of the project for its delivery in terms of what it will do for the community, for local employment. All those things are considered in that process. Amanda, is there anything you wanted to add in that area of merit around this?
Just about how I described my practice as an arts worker, which is a little bit of a different component, and that's to encourage self-expression, creativity and empowerment through the arts, and it was to enhance the contemporary music art form. So some of the material I provided as support material was an interview with myself and the CEO of Little Kids Rock, who's one of my mentors and a real fireball of inspiration and energy, and that gave an opportunity to show us discussing how we use that modality of modern band and some of our techniques with that. And other support materials I provided were Vimeo links of past successful performances I've done with young people, including performance at the Byron Bay Blues Fest, and just other articles to show that I've successfully completed projects in the past and to that level of performance as well. So just having a lot of good support materials to show what you can achieve and how you're going to do it.
Fantastic, and I like that example of an interview, like interviewing yourself as well as potential audience as well. I think it's a good way of showing need as well in terms of the project, as well as that broader discussion around impact, which I might move to now. Kristy, I was just wondering if you might be able to share with us some of the things that NORPA does in terms of measuring impact and how you go about doing that.
Um, yeah, so I guess the areas of impact, we had to narrow it down to choosing either between art form and audience, which were
Mm-hmm.
relevant for us this time around. We went with audience. So one thing that's really exciting about the works that we make ourselves rather than present as we did as we do, as well as producing our own work, is the seasons run for 3 to 4 weeks. So this is where we have the opportunity to reach usually between 3,000 to 4,000 people and audience members, in addition to the large number of artists and creatives who work on the project as well. Also coming off the back of 2 years of COVID and cancellations, this project's, it means sort of everything to us right now, especially post-flood. So I don't know if I'm really answering the question.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but it's different to I guess, being in a regional area, we often get projects and performances that come through for, a 1 or 2 night stand. You don't, so I think these arts projects that have a longevity and, they do have a really large impact across the participants' employment, and also then the audience reach into the community. So I think, yeah, that's what makes them interesting, exciting. Most of the projects like Love for One Night take 1.5 years to make. So a lot of people are touched and engaged and connected throughout that process. So that's what we focus on there.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, some of those sort of key, I guess, if you like, KPIs or key performance indicators attached to projects like, audience numbers, number of nights performances, number of performers employed. All that information is really important sort of metrics to include in your application as well.
Yeah, and I think post-application as well, like thinking about acquittal, like it's important to remind yourself that you need to collect this data if you are successful, and go through with the project. Like really think through how how you say you're going to evaluate, and how you come up with your numbers for your reach and your impact as well is really important, because you are going to have to quantify and respond to that eventually. So give some detailed thought to that.
Yeah, great point. So Amanda, I was just wondering, from your point of view, from an individual application, how did you go about talking about the sort of impacts that your project would have? What were some of the sort of measurables that you talked about in your application?
Well, my impact was focused on contemporary music as an art form, and
Mm-hmm.
because we're sort of, in a way, building new artists by transferring skills and capabilities to young people. So a lot of the feedback or the measurement of success will come from the young people themselves. So their verbal and written responses, but also their outcomes in terms of their ability to perform and their performances. I also get feedback from the schools, so that can be teachers, principals, school counsellors, and even paramedical people like social workers and speech pathologists and those sort of people, to see how, which also feeds into that key priority area, but to get their feedback on how they perceived the project, and how successful the young people were in using those skills and the impact on them. And then we can also take it to the community in terms of public performance and audiences, and to get their feedback also on how it impacted the community and their access to that art form as well. So my main
Fantastic.
approach is, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amanda. So moving on to viability, which is really about putting together a really strong budget for your proposal and for your project. As I mentioned earlier, this is something that we get a lot of inquiries about in terms of helping with advice about preparing budgets. So I'm going to ask you both to share with us basically just your approach to building a budget and some of the things to look out for or to make sure that you're considering when you're preparing that budget. And again, two very different projects with, Kristy's project with NORPA is obviously a very large scale production. And with Amanda's as an individual project, just looking at what some of the differences might be about preparing those sorts of budgets. So, Kristy, I wonder if I could start with you. When you're preparing a budget for a NORPA production, what are some of the things that you are considering?
So usually with a NORPA production, and probably pleasingly as well, one of the largest expenses is employees and salaries for artists, creatives, and production, and everyone who works within the project. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're budgeting in this space as accurately as you can. So to do this, we draw on, as an organisation, we're a member of different bodies, so we look to Live Performance Award to make sure. So if there is a role that maybe the contract hasn't been negotiated as yet, they have information there where you can refer to and say, what is the award rate for, I think, we've got a video switch operator, for example, which we haven't had before because this show has components of live performance as well as camera that's then going to be projected onto the pub on scrims as well. So that's a new position that we haven't had before. So to have that resource of the LPA there was really great. Also, we do get in-kind support. So I think one place, and I know in my first few rounds, if I couldn't get a budget to zero, it was usually because I was overlooking putting in-kind in income as well as in expense. You have to make sure that that's zeroed out. I think that's an easy one to get, or maybe it's not so easy when you don't know about it, but yeah, it's something that can trip you up. I mean, we're very lucky as an organisation. We have a finance manager who helps a lot with our budgets, and a producer on this project. So it really is a collaborative approach there. But it takes a lot longer than you think, especially for a large production. So you really need to make sure that you're not leaving it till the day it's due to sort of put your budget into the form as well, especially if it's not familiar to you. So yeah, take time, go through line by line, and if you have people that you can collaborate with, definitely do that too. I think it's good to get multiple eyes over the budget as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kristy. Amanda, I assume you didn't have a finance manager to put your budget together.
No, I'm the jack of all trades in this case.
So what's your approach when you're putting a budget together for an individual project like the one that you did?
I try to keep it as simple as possible, but you do have to break your project down and think of any hidden costs that maybe you don't think of immediately. You have to really break it down and have a bit of a contingency plan and risk management. And also with these projects, you can only apply for 10% of the project budget up to the $20,000 mark, and then 30% for the larger budgets. So you need to think of, like Kristy mentioned, any in-kind support you might be able to get, or other funding sources to help supplement your project. So, for example, on a smaller scale in my project, one of the local communities offered their bus. So we can transport the young people to performances, which when you're in a regional area and the performance venues can be quite a distance and spread out, that things like that can really help your budget. So, and on a really practical level, don't forget to fill in all the fields, even if they're not sort of applicable to what you're doing, you've got to put a 0, otherwise you go to submit and it doesn't submit. So you don't want to be caught out at the last moment. So yeah, just filling in all those fields regardless. Another tip.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. And yeah, as Amanda mentioned, and Kristy did as well, you're absolutely invited to include in-kind support as an income stream, but make sure that you're also looking at that as an expense stream as well, so it does even out. So it's a zero sum there. But yeah, if you put a value against any volunteer hours as well, that can be included too. Anything that's supporting your project that you can put a dollar value to can be included in your budget. Okay, thank you both for that. I'm just going to have a little bit more of a chat around support material because you are required to submit relevant and current letters of support, confirmation letters from partners, supporters and or collaborators as part of your application. And these letters should basically champion you as an artist or a group or an organisation and talk to the merit, I guess, of the project and the program that you're applying for. You're allowed to submit up to 5 documents, and these can be uploaded within your application. But it's really important to think about what it is that you want to submit as support for your project, because you are limited to those 5 documents. So it's really important to consider what you're going to use to really promote or showcase the value of your project. And I just wanted to talk to ask our guest speakers to talk a little bit about the sort of support material that they provided for their applications and how they went about gathering that, and also importantly how they thought about constructing that that would put their project or their application in the best possible light. Amanda, I might start with you this time. What sort of support material did you gather for your application?
In terms of support letters, I got letters of support from all the different schools because that's where my point of delivery is for this project, because it's sort of shown in regional areas and rural areas and low socioeconomic areas that that's the best delivery point for these programs for young people to gain access. So each of the schools outline kind of their demographics, which can be quite different one to the next, and their need for the project and what they thought would be the benefits of the project for those young people that don't have access to these sorts of arts opportunities. I also got letters of support from the festivals that we're participating in, which was the Uingar Rising Festival, to say how that would improve the festival and the impact for the communities that we're delivering to. So that was another great thing. Sometimes you can get letters from your local arts bodies if they're aware of your work and can speak to the work that you've done in the past. I got a letter of support from our citizen artist, Ash Grunwald, just confirming his role in the project. And just in terms of past performances, just making sure that they're really relevant to the current project, and making sure they're in that format that's, the links are easily to access by the panel, and good to have some visuals in there to get all the different senses involved and get a real image of how it might turn out. So yeah, that was my approach.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And yeah, that's a good point to make in terms of who is looking at your support material. And we'll talk about this in just a moment in terms of the artform advisory boards that assess the applications. But I think it's really important to remember that they're looking at a lot of applications. So anything in there that can make it stand out, strong images, obviously, an obvious one. But yeah, have a think about the fact that, assessment panel members are looking at a lot of material. So always keep thinking about how to make your material stand out is some good advice. Kristy, is there anything you want to add in terms of how you go about thinking about what sort of support material would be best to use and how you go about gathering that?
I think I touched on this before, but I'll just mention it
Sure.
again. So Love for One Night being, it is a large, ambitious project So documentation is always front of mind for us. So for projects, we always invest in it. So past works, I think, were a big component of our support material. So we have sort of like a sizzle reel of past NORPA works that clearly show the success of projects like Railway Wonderland and Dreamland, as well as other immersive theatre experiences like Journey to an Unnamed World, which was, you know, all through Lismore City Hall. So I think video is really nice to have, and like Amanda said, video formed a big component of hers. We also have a strong connection with the local Bundjalung community here. So annually we meet with, in our case, Uncle Roy Gordon and Uncle Gilbert Laurie, let them know what our program is for the year ahead, and they provide us with letters of support, just basically saying they support NORPA as an organisation and the work that we do. So I think that's a really great thing to have, and we also facilitate that through our creative director, First Nations Rhoda Roberts, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, imagery from our rehearsal room, and also mood boards for the show, so that you could see where it's heading outside of the rehearsal room. But I think, yeah, visuals are really important as best you can do to help people understand, you know, what it is, where it's headed.
Yeah.
We included shots of the pub, yeah, all that kind of
Great.
stuff.
Great
Yeah.
advice, thank you. And yeah, I think it is about, as much as you can, anticipating what you're going to need in terms of that support material, because sometimes it can take a lot longer than you think, especially around letters of support. Sometimes people want a bit of time to actually think about what they're going to write. So yeah, anticipating and making sure you give yourself enough time, I think, are some of the key takeouts of that. We mentioned assessment of your application, and we'll move on to that now. So your application will be assessed by an artform advisory board. These advisory boards are made up of leading arts and cultural practitioners, and they include professional artists, producers, business managers, coming from right across the sector. And the purpose of the Artform Assessment Board is to obviously make the assessment process very arm's length from Create New South Wales. So we have independent assessors who come in and assess applications, but also importantly that they come with a skill set. They come with the knowledge of the art form that they are actually assessing. I would also mention that if people are interested in becoming an Artform advisory board member, there's a call out once a year, an EOI process where you're invited to submit an application through the Smarty Grants program on Create New South Wales website. So something to keep in mind if you're interested in being an Artform advisory board member. So there are 10 Artform advisory boards that we have, and they're divided up into Aboriginal Arts and Cultural Board, Classical Music, Opera and Choral, Contemporary Music, Dance and Physical Theatre, the Festivals Board, Literature Board, a Multi-Arts Board, Museums and History Board, Theatre and Musical Theatre, and Visual Arts Board. So they're the 10 categories that are available to assess an application, and you need to think about which is going to be the most appropriate for your application. Obviously, with a project like NORPA's, that spoke very much to the theatre board, so they would have nominated the Theatre and Musical Theatre Board to assess that application. Amanda, similarly with music. I don't know if there's anything you want to add in terms of what you, if you've thought about what Artform board that you wanted to submit your application to, or whether it was pretty much straightforward in terms of the projects that you had. Amanda, was there any consideration that you had before you selected?
Mine was fairly obviously the Contemporary Music Board, because that's where my focus is, and sort of we're developing wonderful new musicians out there in the community. So yeah, it was something that sort of stood out.
Yeah. And Kristy, I assume there was no hesitation in nominating your project for the theatre board?
Yeah, absolutely. Theatre was the obvious choice.
And sometimes, though, there are some grey areas, and you're invited to give us a call at Create New South Wales to have a chat through where you think your project might fall. And that's why, in terms of the Multi-Arts Board, there are projects that traverse a lot of different art forms in the one project, so it might sit more comfortably within the Multi-Arts Board. But if you're in doubt or unsure about where your application should go to, you're more than welcome to talk with a staff member at Create New South Wales to talk that through. We're kind of reaching the end. I guess in terms of what we've heard today, I think some of the key takeouts are ensuring that you give yourself plenty of time to put an application together. There's lots to think about in terms of what you need, the sort of materials you have to pull together for an application. Things in the area of support material, those sorts of things need a lot of consideration to make sure that you're positioning your project in the best possible light it can be put in. I'm going to ask our two presenters to come up with their 3 top tips for consideration when putting an application in based on their experience. And I might start with you, Amanda. Have you got 3 top tips that you can share with us?
Yeah, my 3 hot tips. Number 1, I said just be really visionary and innovative. Be passionate about your project and let that shine through your application, because passion and vision are really infectious and can catch the spirit of the board, hopefully. The one we keep mentioning repeatedly is the get started early, because you're going to need it to follow up on all your budgets and collaborators. And number 3, I said enjoy the process, because at first it might seem overwhelming, especially if you're an individual. Having to prepare a grant can seem a bit daunting at first, but it does really help you bring your vision to reality, and it kind of forces you to take the practical steps that's going to get your vision out there in the world. And enjoy the process as part of your art form.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. Kristy, how about you?
Time, an obvious one that we've talked about a lot. Yeah. So leave yourself plenty of time. I also had just leaning on or getting in touch with your industry organisations and peers, if you can, especially if you haven't had experience. I think it's really good to talk to people. And you can use them as part of your application. I talked about Live Performance Australia, but also Cultural Development Network to help you formulate how you'll evaluate your project, I think is a really good one. I had sort of a practical one. The response boxes don't really allow formatting, but don't let that turn you away from using headings and dot points to really, I guess, highlight the key points of your application, or even using language from the eligibility criteria as a heading when you're responding directly to something, so it's really clear and easy to read, not just a stream of consciousness. Can help. And then support material, leaving plenty of time for your support material. Just you can access the application early, so have a look and work out what you're going to need, and get ahead of it if you can. Time always seems to go so fast, but
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kristy. And just to reiterate that we are here to help. So Create New South Wales have staff that you can talk to. We have a program called Pick Time, which you can access through the website. If you go to the Create New South Wales website, you can book an appointment, a pre-application appointment, so you can discuss your application in a little more detail, and to ask any questions or anything that you're uncertain about with the application process. So you're more than welcome to make that appointment with a staff member here at Create New South Wales. The other thing that we have, as I mentioned earlier, is a number of these webinars that sit on the Create New South Wales website, and they cover some broad areas like we have today, which is a general discussion around the Arts and Cultural Funding Program. But there are some specific webinars that look at things like budgets or priority areas. So they're always worth having a look at before putting your application together. And I think one of our presenters talked about the opportunity to talk to your peers as well, if you're looking for some advice. Or I often advise people to put their draft application in front of someone who knows nothing about your project, just to make sure that it's reading for sense, that it's making sense to them. And as we said earlier, one of the key things in that process is just using plain English and making sure that you're being very economical with how you're describing your project, and not assuming knowledge. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to say a very big thank you to Amanda and Kristy for sharing their processes for putting applications together. And I think they had some great insights there and some great advice about what you might want to consider before putting an application in. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to David and Claire, our Auslan interpreters today. And thank you all for joining us for this webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.